In this episode, we continue our three-part series as we count down the top 10 shows of 2022. Last week, we started at number 10, and today we'll pick up at the show ranked number 7 and work down to number 4. Here are the topics we'll hit on today's show: expanding your cattle herd in an upmarket, a Canadian ranch tour, the evolution of using horses on our ranches, and finally, fall cow work. We're counting them down, the top shows of 2022 at 7th through 4th on this episode of the Working Ranch Radio Show. And we welcome you here to the Working Ranch Radio Show. I'm Justin Mills. I hope you're listening and you're thawed out. Man, oh man, it has been just unreal. The cold temperatures that we've seen stretch across pretty much, you can say, all of North America this last week. And as we'll hear from Don Day later in our show, it sounds like we're going to see a little bit of a reprieve from the cold temperatures. But he says, keep in mind, we're still in winter months, so we're going to see some winter carrying on. But maybe some of that we're going to be seeing is in the form of some snow. And so for folks that are really wanting to build a good snow base up in the mountains for this summer, where we're going to need it, yeah, that's going to start to happen. We're going to hear a little bit more about that. So join us at the end of our show here today as we talk with meteorologist Don Day as he joins us, as he does in every show. Well, today's show, if you heard in our as we began, we're going to continue with part 2 of episode 99 as we continue our countdown of top 10 shows of 2022 as we take your votes as listeners out there that download it through the podcast sites. We take and look at the first week downloads, 1 month downloads, and total downloads, kind of put that all together. And I kind of joked about last week a little bit about taking it to the accounting firm of Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe. And they gave us tabulated everything and gave us the results on that, but kind of a joke there. I hope you caught that. But nevertheless, we do have a top 10 list. Last week we did started at 10, worked our ways down to number 8, and just to recap a little bit on that, the show that came in at number 10 was episode 85 on carbon credits. The show that came in at number 9 was episode 97 on Sustainable Beef LLC, a packing plant starting up in Nebraska, and the show that came in ranked number 8 was episode 80, using long-term forecasts for stocking decisions. And so we'll continue today. We're going to work through 4 shows today as we start at number 7 and work our way down to number 4. Be sure to join us next week as well, as we'll get to the top 3 episodes that we have in our rankings here for 2022. Well, I want to give you an update here on this show today because I had been talking about it in previous shows, and it was about Hydrobed selling their 20th thousand Hydrobed. They did that through Big Iron online auction, and that sold on the 21st of December this past week. Here's what it went for. It went for $16,750, and all of that money going to raise money and awareness for kids with type 1 diabetes. So thanks to the buyer on that, and also a big thank you to Hydrobed, and congratulations to them on their 20th thousand Hydrobed. A thank you to our sponsors here today: Zinpro Perfusion Drench. Optimize performance from the start with Zinpro Perfusion Drench. And the American Simmental Association. Heterosis works, which is why with Simmental, it's more per head, period. Find out more at simmental.org. And Gain Smart Mineral by Biozyme. Increased pasture utilization with the Amafirm advantage found in all Gain Smart minerals. Find out more at gainsmart.com. And finally, Performance Ranch. Don't keep your cow-calf herd data in a notebook. Keep it in the cloud with Performance Ranch. Find out more at performancelivestockanalytics.com. Well, right now, let's check in with the captain, Tim O'Byrne, publisher and editor of Working Ranch Magazine, for this week's edition of Tim's 2 Cents.
Hey, Justin. Hey, everybody out there in Working Ranch Radio Land, especially those of you who are dealing with this terrible winter weather. God bless you in your efforts. You are taking care of the livestock every single day, the neighbors, yourselves, and we're following it all on our Facebook page. Thanks for sharing with us, and we're right there rooting for you. This is the Christmas season. We can't forget what it's really all about. And I know a lot of you folks understand that. I'm proud of that, proud to be part of that group. Now, we have a problem here. The U.S. FDA is cautioning horse owners not to feed Top of the Rockies alfalfa cubes with a special code number. You can go to the Texas Animal Health Commission website and get all this information. But apparently it is causing some major problems with horses. The symptoms are, attending veterinarians and state officials have reported that horses have shown symptoms of neurological illness, including muscle tremors that rapidly progressed to the whole body, weakness, depressed tongue tone, agitation, and inability to stand. If you see these symptoms in your horse, seek immediate veterinary care. Now, the problem here is that the FDA is aware that at least 98 horses in Colorado, Louisiana, New Mexico, and Texas have shown these signs. At least 45 of these horses have died or were euthanized due to declining health. So, Top of the Rockies alfalfa cubes, contact your veterinarian or your nutritionist and make sure that you're on point when it comes to this very important topic. God bless every one of you out there. And Justin, you're just doing such a terrific job here. I hope you and your family have a great Christmas. Everybody has one. And we'll catch up to you down the road. That is my 2 cents. Adios.
All right, thanks, Captain, and happy holidays to you and Christine as well. We wish you the best and appreciate all the hard work that you guys do on behalf of Working Ranch Magazine and also here Working Ranch Radio Show. When we come back, we're going to step in as we continue working through our top 10 shows of 2022. We'll start with the show that came in ranked number 7 and work down the list to the show ranked number 4. We'll get into it when we come back here on the Working Ranch Radio Show. Cattle producers, here's a way to put more dollars in your pocket. Put the Amifirm Advantage found in all Gain Smart mineral to work in your cow herd. Amifirm is the industry leader in increasing fiber digestion. In fact, research shows putting Amifirm to work increases forage utilization by 10%, reducing overall forage costs and allowing you to graze more animals per acre. That's a big-time return on your investment. To find which Gain Smart mineral formula is right for your herd, visit Gainsmart.com.
Don't keep your cow-calf herd data in a notebook. Keep it in the cloud with Performance Ranch and say so long to decoding handwritten notes. Performance Ranch is an easy-to-use app that simplifies record-keeping and makes decision-making easier. Keep track of herd inventory, monitor health records, and manage costs, all from your iPad or iPhone. Group texting important herd data? Delete it. Use Performance Ranch instead. Go to performancelivestockanalytics.com and be the first to know when Performance Ranch is ready to launch.
And we welcome you back here to the Working Ranch Radio Show. I'm Justin Mills, and if you missed us in the first segment, you know that we are working through here our top 10 episodes of 2022. And in last week's episode, we started at number 10 and worked our way down to number 8. And now today we're going to pick up with where we left off. So we're going to start with the show that came in at number 7. It goes back to July 1st of 2022, but it was episode 76, Expanding Your Cattle Herd in an Up Market. I brought in a friend of mine, Wally Olson, out of Claremore, Oklahoma, to talk with me about that. He has a tremendous amount of history and experience in trading cattle and knowing the markets out there. So we're going to pick up with part of my conversation with Wally Olson on this as we talk about expanding your cattle herd in an up market.
When we look at this opportunity that is before us, what do you feel are some good ways that we need to be looking at when it comes to expanding our herds?
One of the biggest thing is and whether you're just, like I said, coming out of a drought or in the best of times, or if the market's going down or if the market's going up, what you need to always be doing is just good marketing. And how that is done is you need to always be looking at the relationships of the market, of the different classes of animals today. And that's all you can look about. Everybody's talking about, what do you think tomorrow's going to do? I don't have an idea, but I do know one thing. There's going to be class animals that are going to be undervalued to other classes. Mm-hmm. And so that's basically what you do. And the way you find out those things is you just do the math. And I will give you some examples. is, and the first example I'm going to work through, and these are today's markets as close as I could find, is that in Oklahoma, Nebraska, a 450-pound heifer sold for $855. I think that's $1.90. And to make her into a bred heifer to weigh 1,000 pounds using $1 a pound, you add those two together and you end up with $1,405 in a bred heifer. Mm-hmm. And so now that you know that, you can, start comparing other things. Like in Torrington or in Wyoming, some bred heifers sold pairs sold for $1,950. And so you can compare that heifer for $1,950 to the bred heifer, and as you work through it, it comes out. When you do all the math, when you subtract the value of the calf from the cost of the cow, put on your cost to carry, that heifer pair for bred again is worth $1,350 versus $1,405. So in other words, those $1,900 bred heifers were a good buy.
Okay. Well, and you talk about the heifer market right now, because I believe that's when you and I talked before, or when I sent some questions to you about what I wanted to talk about, that was really a market that I felt had some potential as well. We've seen these heifers be considerably undervalued, I guess, if you want to call it that way. Maybe I'm not the guy feeding them out, other than just putting some grass underneath them. But that heifer market has been the weak side of the market in the last several years. Is that what you're seeing as well?
The heifer market is usually, in a cow herd, of all the classes of animals, most of the time your weaned heifer calf is the most undervalued animal. Mm-hmm. And probably in your herd inventory, is the 5-year-old cow is the most overvalued animal. Mm-hmm. And so you need to be watching and capturing the appreciation of the heifer calf up to the bred cow and stuff. Now you got to realize during the drought, bred cows, were basically selling for killer price, so there was no appreciation. I mean, last January and February was probably one of the greatest times to get in the cow business, because you could buy bred cows very reasonable. And so you just need to be aware of that. And I use what I call a cow bell curve, which I compare the value of a heifer calf to the value of the bred cow. And I compare that value of that bred cow to a cull cow. And that way I find out how much appreciation going from the heifer to the bred cow is, and how much depreciation going from the bred cow down to the cull cow. Mm-hmm. And it tells you what you can do.
As we're starting to see this market pick up a little bit, and these cows last year that were maybe, like you said, bred cows that were selling for killer prices now have picked up, and they have some increased in value. So as we're seeing a market uptick, how do we look at this and understand, how do we work in cow depreciation and understand that in an upcycle in this market?
The biggest thing is you just need to, and I will drill this into you, is look at the relationships of the classes of animals. Okay. And back then, when bred cows were so cheap, if you compared them, you could buy a young bred cow for the same price as a weaned heifer calf. Mm-hmm. And so it doesn't take, you buy the young bred cow, because there's no way you can turn a heifer calf into a bred heifer, mm-hmm. and so you just need to be looking at the relationships. And if you watch now, the relationships, the young bred cows will go up faster, most probably, than a heifer calf.
Yeah.
And if you watch, they sold, as I understand, they sold some $3,400 first calf heifer pairs in Billings this last week. And I've talked to a gentleman in Bismarck, North Dakota, and they were talking about $3,600 pairs. We have a very short memory about about this. It just amazes me and stuff. And there's still great opportunities out there, even today. I mean, so you just need to do the math and understand how to figure out whether a cow is of value in the relationships. And one thing, lots of people, first, they never used to talk about depreciation. And now people are talking about cow depreciation. One thing that is missing is you've got to have appreciation before you can have depreciation. And so you need to be able to understand and find where your appreciation is coming in your cow herd, and then capture that and mitigate the depreciation. And all it is you just do the math. And what you do is you compare the cost of a weaned heifer calf to what it cost you to turn it into a bred heifer compared to the value of your bred cows. And that's basically it.
And we'll cut in here as that was just part of my conversation with Wally Olson out of Claremore, Oklahoma, as we were discussing in episode 76, expanding your cattle herd in an up market, that went out on podcast platforms on Friday, July 1st of this last summer. And as relevant as it was last summer, it's going to be even more relevant here this coming year as well, and probably in the following year. So it's just some good information there to pay attention to. Wally Olson, I've known him for quite some time as I went to his marketing schools. If you want to find out more about his marketing schools, you can go to his website at olsonranchllc.com, and you can find more information on that. Well, stay with us. Coming up in our next segment, we're going to look at the shows that came in at number 6 and number 5 when we return on the Working Ranch Radio Show.
Set up the next generation for a productive lifetime with Zinpro Avela 4. Achieve productive success in your cows with 20% increased conception rate and a 16-day tighter calving interval. Calves from cows supplemented with Zinpro hit the ground running with improved immunity and 28 more pounds at weaning. Allow your cows and calves to perform to their full potential with Zinpro Avela 4.
And we'll welcome you back here to the Working Ranch Radio Show. I'm Justin Mills as we're working our way through the top 10 episodes of 2022. Last week we started and we worked our way from 10 all the way down to number 8. And in the last segment, we looked at the show that was at the number 7 slot. And now the show that came in our rankings at number 6 as we move to our neighbors to the north. And in episode 83 that aired on August 19th of this last summer, we visited and took a ranch tour of the Calgary Stampede's OH Ranch, telling the story as manager Kent Pigeon and his wife joined me to talk a little bit about what they have going on there. Let's step into that conversation now. Ken, let's start first by giving us a little bit of a background here of the OH Ranch.
Hi, folks. This is Ken Pigeon from the OH Ranch in Longview, Alberta, just southwest of Calgary, about an hour and 15 minutes. To give you a little history on the ranch. The ranch was first came in 1881 with two fellows named Orville Hawkins Smith and Lafayette French. If you take the O and the H from Orville Hawkins, you come up with the OH brand. They registered that brand in 1881. It was the 25th brand to be registered in Alberta at that time. And then it's one of the two oldest continuously used brands in the province. Okay. And then in 1883, them two boys, they got a little antsy to go look for gold. So they sold the property to the Ings brothers. And when the Ings brothers got here, the Highwood River, which flows through parts of the ranch, was flooding. And they had a little trouble crossing the river, and they kind of changed the name to the Rio Alto Ranch. And Rio Alto in Spanish means high water. And it stayed as the Rio Alto right up until 1950s when Pat Burns owned it then, and then he sold it off in the 1950s. And the ranch's name was officially changed back to the OH Ranch. And then in 1987, a fellow by the name of Doc Seaman purchased the ranch. And he was kind of ahead of his time. He was kind of an environmentalist in ways, because the Canadian military was trying to purchase the ranch as a training ground. And Doc couldn't see that happening, so under his leadership, he bought the ranch. And then under his leadership, he had a few things that he really wanted to focus on. One was conservation management. 2 was rest and rotational grazing. 3 was off-stream watering, get them out of the creek beds and out of the river. And then he also moved away from hay production and reseeded any hayland back to native grass. wasn't totally successful. Of that stuff that he seeded, probably 60% of that is still tame grass. Mm-hmm. And then in 2007 or around there, Doc also received from the Alberta government the Environmental Stewardship Award for ranches.
Okay. And this wasn't, of course, the very first ranch that the Calgary Stampede had. And I know you guys don't manage the other ranch, which is also in operation by the Calgary Stampede, but it wasn't technically the first ranch that the Calgary Stampede was having to manage.
No, they have a ranch in Hanna, Alberta, and they call it the Stampede Ranch, and it's about 22,000 acres, and it basically runs the bucking horse program, the Born to Buck program, and any buck and bulls or rodeo livestock are at the Hanna Ranch. Mm-hmm.
So you had talked about that when Doc Siemens came in, there was a lot of conservation practices that were put into place at that particular time, and then there was a collaboration with the Nature Conservancy in that. Is that management, do you continue to this day with some of those practices that he implemented in that?
Yeah, actually we do, and we try to improve on them if we can. So the Nature Conservancy is on the deeded land, and say we want to go develop a spring or do something that might disturb the ground, the native ground, we have to go and get an approval from the Nature Conservancy to do that. And that there's a certain amount of paperwork, hence Deb, that has to be done with that to get those approvals. Because it's considered an ecological gift, to the NCC, a lot of times your approvals come from Ottawa.
Mm-hmm. Depending on your project that you're doing and the extent of it, if it's a brand new project and it's turning new ground, yeah, some of those projects do have to go all the way through Ottawa, like Ken said, for approval. Other times, if it's an existing unit or an existing project that we've got and it's just repairing, sometimes it can be done locally, but it's a little bit more in-depth, that's for sure, with paperwork and approval processes. Mm-hmm.
Ken, let's get now into just the ranch, some of the day-to-day stuff that you do, because I think when folks think of Calgary Stampede, they pretty much think of the event that takes place every summer, but also the phenomenal bucking stock that make up the Calgary Stampede, of their buck and string that they send down the road and they use for their own event. But there's also a real working ranch component, which is what you all do at the OH Ranch. So let's get into that from an enterprise mix and just what all is part of your ranch that you guys are managing on the OH Ranch for the Calgary Stampede.
Basically, we're a cow-calf operation, and we've got 8,000 acres, but we only run about 300 head of cow-calf pairs. We have Angus cows, black and red, with there's some Hereford influence in it, but we breed all our cows back to purebred black and Angus bulls. And then on top of that, the cow operation, we also usually in the summer, we summer grass about 50 head of young buck and horses for the Hanna Ranch. Our calves, we sell them annually on a video sale. We don't hold back any of our replacement heifers. We buy replacement heifers from a fellow that sold us part of the original herd in 2012. And it keeps our bloodlines and keeps everything good for us. And we're really happy with our partnership with him. We also are part of the Verified Beef Production Plus program. And that's basically an on-farm food safety with standards and regulations, traceability. The Plus was added in the last couple of years, and it's more to deal with now animal care, biosecurity, environmental stewardship, consumer confidence. Everything ranchers are fighting. One of the biggest fights we have is with consumer confidence. Mm-hmm. So we're trying to get our educational story out there so that people hear that their food is actually very safe and raised humanely.
Now with that as well, we also manage a cattle handling program and tracking program called Herd Tracks. And with that, we can track every cc of drugs that we need to give when we're doctoring. We can track all the movements of the cattle. We track shipping, we track sales, we track mortalities, everything that goes on with a cattle herd. And so that program is a great management tool for the ranch as well. And we implemented that about 4 years ago. So that kind of falls right into line with the Verified Beef program. Again, it's consumer confidence, as Ken said, and we have to do an audit, a self-audit every year on that. And then every 5 years, they do an actual audit, and they audit the cow herd, our rangeland, and our animal care practices and all of that kind of thing. So it's a little more intensive. It's, mind you, a lot of people are utilizing technology today, and we're no different. Mm-hmm. So this is an online cattle tracking program, and so far we've been very, very happy with it.
Mm-hmm. And I think we'll step in here as there's more to that conversation with manager Kent Pigeon and his wife Deb of the OH Ranch that the Calgary Stampede owns, as they also talked quite a bit about their relationship with the Nature Conservancy. And I think you'd be surprised to hear some of the comments about that, in addition to their role as being educational component to folks in their part of the country about agriculture and livestock agriculture, and a great conversation there. Again, that was episode 83, the Calgary Stampede's OH Ranch, telling the story, the show that came in at number 6 in our rankings for 2022. Now we move to the show that came in ranked number 5, and it was an interview and a conversation I had with Idaho horseman and stockman Martin Black, as we talked about the evolution of using horses here in the ranching industry. It was episode 65, the horse from essential to ... and you kind of fill that in as we talked a little bit about that. Let's step into that conversation now, as we're in the middle of discussing bringing on these younger horses.
You know, for myself, I'm not as good about taking that time and not being patient with those younger horses. And you get into a situation, you're like, well, I'm just going to go grab the old horse because I know all the buttons and how that works, and not maybe spend a little extra time and effort with that younger horse to get them where they need to be.
Well, that's the warrior in us, the young male syndrome, and that's just something that we got to deal with. Some people learn it earlier than others, and you see older guys that still have a short fuse and impatient and get mad at their horse and things like that. But every once in a while you see a young guy maybe in their 20s or something that never comes to the surface. And, it's frustrating because we want to get more done, but we got to regulate ourselves and not let ourselves do that. We're a predator. Horses are a prey animal, and our brains are different. We think different. We value things different, and it doesn't take much for us to trigger that horse to go into a self-preservation mode, and pretty quick they get to a point that they quit thinking, they quit reasoning. They have very little ability to reason anyway compared to us. And a lot of people don't understand that. They think, well, why does he do that? Well, he thinks different than we do. His brain's wired different. Mm-hmm. And so that gets in people's way. When the horse knows you're mad before you know you're mad, and they go into the self-preservation mode and start protecting themselves instead of learning or trying to get with you and help you and whatnot. But if we can eliminate that, that's huge. And that's what Tom Dorrance and some of these guys have really brought to the surface, for people. And that's what a lot of these clinicians are kind of trying to present to people. They don't have near what Tom had. They don't have the miles or the experience or the knowledge, but in so many ways, and that's what they're trying to get across, is a kind, gentle way. But that kind of goes overboard to where we pet them and feed them treats, and we can't really get anything done with them when it comes to doing a job too, But again, that's what sells to the ladies in town. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because that kind of fits the nurture. That's what I call the older females as the nurturers, and the younger males are the warriors. And that's by nature. People are wired that way. So not a criticism to either one. Mm-hmm. It's the young males need to soften up and be a little more of a nurturer, but the nurturers at times, they need to firm up and have a little more warrior in them too, or they're not lap dogs, these horses. They're big and they can hurt you. They get scared, they run over you, and they get hurt. I've seen just as many people get hurt, with the kindness, and the gentle horse is a bronc that you need to kind of watch. Mm-hmm.
Back to where we're at with the average size out there and trying to find justification. Maybe there's that desire to use horses, but at the same time, when it really comes down to it, it's really easy to just jump on the four-wheeler and go out there and do the job. And so the time, the economics of it is something that guys kind of weighs in, and I feel is our dilemma here in 2022.
Yes. And no, it takes longer to saddle a horse and go do a little job, and you could do it in half the time, just to run out and check your cattle, say, for example, a little 40-acre pasture. Well, yeah, you could run around there on a four-wheeler and see that everything's all right way quicker than you could, probably just catch your horse and saddle it and have him ready to get on, especially if it's a young horse, you need to take a little extra time with. So that's changed. But on the other hand, my son teaches at a college, and he's got a program. He tries to show people where the value of selling made horses, offsets the time that you put into it. And he's got a good point there, I think, and that is, to be more specific, if you're not selling horses, you don't get anything for your time, extra time that you put on that horse. But if you are, in 4 or 5 years down the road, you got a beat up, wore out four-wheeler that is worth nothing. Mm-hmm. Versus you go do that job on a horse, and it might take you more time to get him saddled and going, but at the end of that 4 or 5 year period, or even a 90-day period, if you want to turn young horses over, point is you can turn that young horse over, and if you're interested in the horsemanship side of it and the horse training side of it, if you want to use that term, you can sell that horse for, holy hell, there's horses selling for hundreds of thousands of dollars now. Geldings. I can't understand this market today. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But ranch horses are in big demand. I think that's part of the cycle here is, the clinicians, and I don't mean to sound like I'm being critical, but they've sold this horse breaking thing to people, and it's good till you get out of a walk and you got to head that cow off, and the horse still isn't broke. Mm-hmm. So I think a lot of people have. It's took them a decade or two to figure this out, but they're better off to pay a little extra money, especially when the hospital bills factor into it. They're better off to pay a little extra money and just get a good broke horse. Well, where do you find them? Mm-hmm. Unless not that there are not other places, but one of the best places to find them is a good broke horse coming off a ranch. Mm-hmm. So if the ranches, and that's what's selling for such ridiculous money. These good ranch horses are selling for more money than a lot of the top show horses. Explain that.
Yeah. Yeah.
They don't have to have a fancy pedigree, or they like them to look pretty. Everybody likes a pretty horse, but But that. So there's an argument there that if a guy will just kind of take a little interest, take a little extra time, and go check your cattle on that colt, like you're talking about, calving or whatever it might be. And young horses aren't that expensive. So if you do the economics of it, you pay $1,000 or several $1,000s for a young horse. You go to turn him over, we'll just add a zero or two to it. Mm-hmm. That kind of changes the economics of and especially the price of four-wheelers today.
Yeah. And we'll step in and pull away from that conversation that I had back on Friday, April 8th of 2022 with Idaho horseman and stockman Martin Black. It was episode 65 as we talked about the evolution of using horses on our ranches. I encourage you to go back and listen to that. If you want to also find out more information on Martin, you can go to his website at martinblack.net. He's also on the various social media sites and has a great YouTube channel as well. So number 5 in our slot was episode 65, talking about the horses' use here on our ranches. Well, stay with us. Coming up after the break, we're going to get into our last one for this show, and that's the show that came in ranked number 4. Be sure to tune in next week as we're going to be going through our top 3 shows as well. But coming back after the break, what was the show that hit the number 4 slot in our episodes for 2022? You'll find out when we return. Starting off in the right direction is essential to gaining an advantage later when you go to market your calves. And I have proof that the right direction is with Sim Angus sired calves. A 2020 study by K-State showed that Sim Angus sired steer calves earn more at sale time than all other breed identified sire groups, with at least 50 lots represented on Superior Livestock's 2020 summer sales. The proof's right there. For low-risk, high-potential calves with earning potential, be confident that Sim Genetics will give you more per head, period. Stand strong, Simmental. And we welcome you back here to the Working Ranch Radio Show. I'm Justin Mills as we continue working ourselves down the list of the top 10 episodes of 2022. And in this segment, we're going to be looking at the show that came in ranked number 4. And if you're wondering just how that the rankings were established and how we put them together, well, it really kind of came down to you all, the listeners, and those that downloaded the shows. We looked at first week downloads, 1 month downloads, and total downloads, and then kind of put some weighted numbers and looked at some different matrices in there to determine that. And so here is the show that came in at number 4, and it aired on Saturday, September 17th is when it came out on the podcast platforms. Episode 87, Fall Cow Work, Are We Making the Most Out of It? And it was a conversation interview that I had with Dr. Steve Paisley with the University of Wyoming. And the basis of it really was getting down to just being efficient with what those times that we have the cattle in, that we're working them, and basically putting that all into perspective so that we're not overstressing the livestock, because we know that stress leads to really poor utilization and efficacy of vaccines, but also just sickness, and which would lead to death loss as well. So let's step into that conversation now as we talk about fall cow work. And here is part of that conversation that I had with Dr. Steve Paisley with the University of Wyoming. From your mindset, as you look at preconditioning, what are some of those ways? I know this is where the BQA stuff might kind of come into this conversation as well, but from your perspective, what are some of the ways that we can reduce stress in these cattle during preconditioning?
I think ways we can address that is, first of all, maybe when we can gather those cattle, hopefully we can pick times that are relatively cool. Hopefully we can do it early in the morning. Try and isolate that into time periods where we can reduce heat stress on the cattle. Maybe even we don't do it all in one day. Maybe we can move them closer to our working facilities one morning and pick another morning to move them a little bit further. Maybe we can divide up some of the activities we need to, or management we need to do with those cattle, and just try and give those cattle enough time to rest and recover as we do it. I know we preconditioned it at home. We preconditioned and vaccinated heifers, and we had our first calf heifers in. We're trying to preg test those. Well, by the time we get everything done, it's 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and the cattle are tired, we're tired, we're grumpy. Trying to manage that and schedule some of these things so we can reduce the amount of stress just from a time management standpoint. Other things to address too while you're at it is how we handle those cattle, and can we work them quietly? Can we work them slowly? Just some of the basic fundamentals. A lot of times we look at our watch, or we look at the temperature, and we're trying to speed up, and we try to do things more quickly, and that ends up just hurting us later on. So, work cattle slowly, kind of understanding the basic fundamentals or concepts of pressure and release, getting cattle to respond to what you want them to do, and all of those types of things I think can reduce stress, and that's beneficial all the way through. Not only do you end up producing calmer cattle, but I think you reduce the stress and you improve the vaccine response to those cattle once you do get that vaccine in them and go through the preconditioning process.
You mentioned something just a bit ago, and maybe I jumped ahead into some other conversation here first, but it says maybe, defining what preconditioning is. That could be different for different folks. So maybe let's back up a little bit and let's put some definition to preconditioning.
Yeah, in a lot of cases, we've had to define what preconditioning is through some of the marketing avenues we have for our cattle. So if you market your cattle on a video, or you work through some of the organized programs that are out there, preconditioning can mean a VAC 45 program where we have a specific set of vaccines that we need to give to those cattle, which includes a 45-day dry lot period or 45-day weaning period before those cattle are marketed. So the traditional VAC 45 type of a program is that. that doesn't necessarily, I mean, if you market your cattle based on that and you've got them listed based on that type of a program, it's important to follow those protocols, make sure it's documented so that you can remain in compliance with those marketing programs. But there are other options and alternatives out there. If you're like many of us this year and we've got a limited amount of meadow hay or limited amount of grass down around our receiving pens, we're probably not looking at a traditional dry lot receiving program or traditional dry lot weaning program. Getting some type of vaccination or preconditioning into those cattle, preferably 3 to 4 weeks prior to weaning, is just critical. Mm-hmm. And so if you can manage that, if you can get cattle in prior, preferably 3 weeks prior to weaning, and get your first round of vaccines in those cattle, I think it's beneficial all the way around. I would encourage, regardless of how you choose to market those cattle, documenting, what products you used, the timing of when you gave those shots. Even if you're going to sell those cattle through the local livestock auction, I think providing that information is important to those buyers. I think that means something to all of them. And I think not only documenting, writing it down, keeping track of what you did, but also communicating that to the buyers is a really important step.
Mm-hmm. When we bring these cattle in and we do the preconditioning, what are some other things that we could be doing to take advantage of that time of we've got those cattle in the corral? Is there other things we could be doing at that time? Not maybe just with our calves, but with our cows as well.
I think there definitely is. Certainly, we can be sorting those calves. Maybe we've got the ability to sort our herd into steers and heifers to at least get part of that initial sort out of the way before we wean calves. If you think about shrink and how we market our cattle, and depending on how you market those animals, the less we handle those cattle, the more quietly we handle those cattle, the less shrink we get on those cattle, the less amount of stress. And so anything we can do ahead of time to reduce stress at the time of weaning, I think is really important. So if we can sort steers and heifers and pair those off in that manner, I think that's something to consider. Another option that might be of interest to some people is, we could preg test at preconditioning, whether it's with the veterinarian or maybe you choose to do a blood test on those cattle. Getting that information and having that information handy for when you do wean will reduce the amount of work that you do the day of weaning. Maybe will just allow you to sort those cattle at the day of weaning rather than preg testing and everything else. Those are all options to think about. And any additional work maybe that you need to do to those cows prior to weaning is beneficial. So I think, planning ahead, as we mentioned before, whether it's choosing your vaccine, maybe even if we step back before that, if we have some idea when we're going to wean those calves, thinking about your mineral program, maybe 60 to 90 days prior to weaning, and addressing some of those types of things as early as that can help and improve response to vaccination, improve your overall herd health, reduce your amount of sickness. All of those things can be factors, and that's all information that you can communicate once you do decide to market those cattle.
And we'll cut in here, as that was just part of my conversation with Dr. Steve Paisley with the University of Wyoming, as we talked in episode 87, Fall Cow Work, Are We Making the Most of It? That aired on September 17th of this last year. That's the show that came in, ranked in the number 4 spot in our shows for 2022. And I believe it's a show that is going to have a lot of shelf life, because it's not only applicable to this last year, but it really has a lot of usefulness for upcoming years, as well, as we really do need to be thinking about before we get into that time of the year. When do we plan to market these calves? Back that calendar up a little bit, and then begin to look at our fall work and putting that on the calendar accordingly, and trying to make it so that we can work these cattle in such a way that we don't overstress them and make the most of our time and our resources in that. So you can go back and listen again. The show ranked number 4 was episode 87, Fall Cow Work, Are We Making the Most of It? Well, as we take a pause in finishing out our top 3, we're going to be doing that next week, so be sure to tune in to next week's episode. But coming up after the break, meteorologist Don Day joins us as we talk about probably really the number 1 topic that's been on our minds for the last couple of weeks, and that is weather. We're going to talk about it with meteorologist Don Day after the break.
Don't Keep your cow-calf herd data in a notebook. Keep it in the cloud with Performance Ranch and say so long to decoding handwritten notes. Performance Ranch is an easy-to-use app that simplifies record keeping and makes decision-making easier. Keep track of herd inventory, monitor health records, and manage costs, all from your iPad or iPhone. Group texting important herd data? Delete it. Use Performance Ranch instead. Go to performancelivestockanalytics.com and be the first to know when Performance Ranch is ready to launch.
And welcome back to the Working Ranch Radio Show. Justin Mills with you as we're joined now by meteorologist Don Day with a look at our long-term weather. And, you know, our shows here the last week, this week, and next week are all going back and picking out the top 10 shows. And while that may seem somewhat important in some ways, the weather has really capitalized a lot of everybody's attention here for the last couple of weeks. And as you and I were talking before we went on air, you know, for some of us, it's the last 2 weeks has been pretty brutal.
Yeah, I tell you, the last 2 weeks across the parts of the central and northern Rockies, and especially the central and northern high plains, this 2 weeks has just been absolutely brutal. We had one of the strongest December blizzards I can remember a week ago, a little more than a week ago. And then we have witnessed the biggest Arctic outbreak that North America has seen, at least in terms of intensity and size and scale, since maybe back to the late 80s and early 90s. So back-to-back weeks of really intense winter weather conditions, and it's been difficult. And so I know it's been hard on folks, and this will be a December that a lot of folks are going to remember.
Yeah, for sure. I want to talk a little bit about what we're going to be seeing here for the next couple of weeks, and I'm going to equate it to flushing toilet, okay? Because the weather's kind of been in the toilet the last couple of weeks. So we're going to say when you flush a toilet, it has to rebuild that reservoir, and that's kind of where we're going to be at here for the upcoming few weeks. Is we've had this pretty extreme cold weather, and now it's going to have to reload. So we're going to see some mildness to it, but by no means are we out of winter.
Exactly. But there's one good thing about the natural response to the last few weeks of intense winter weather is for the Mother Nature to sort of counterbalance that with a shift. And we see this typically after a large Arctic outbreak in particular, is when you release all that cold air out of the higher latitudes, that changes things with the jet stream. And we will enter a phase across most of the central and western United States and really most of the country to where after this Christmas time snowstorm and Arctic outbreak eases, we'll go into the New Year's time frame with a little bit more of a milder trend. And what this will mean is that less Arctic air and more in the way of North Pacific air. Now, North Pacific air does not necessarily mean we've got a really big warm up coming our way, but temperatures are going to be more moderate. We do not anticipate a big Arctic outbreak again for another 2 weeks, maybe 3. I don't really want to go past 2 weeks. But one thing we will see is that Pacific offering up some moisture. So we're going to see some rain and snow come back into California and the Pacific Northwest. And these systems will move across the northern tier. So the northern Rockies and the northern plains, while there may not be severe cold, there's going to be some often opportunities for a little bit of snowfall as well.
Yeah, and that's one of the things you talked about is we're going to see maybe some buildup of some of the snowpack, which is going to be very valuable for the western half of the country that really does rely on that later on. And of course, it affects the Midwest too, the snowpack that we see here in the Rocky Mountains and up into Canada as well. But that's what we're going to see, maybe some build onto that.
Yeah, we will. As we talked during the last program, the snowpack was off to a really good start. And we see as we go through the last days of December into the first week or two of the new year, that trend will continue. So it's good news overall. We're going to see some relief from the intense winter weather, but at the same time, we're still going to have systems coming on through.
Mm-hmm. I forgot to ask you this question or prep you for this before we went on air here, but I received a question from a listener out of Big Piney, Wyoming, Robbie McNeil, who emailed me. And you and I had talked previously about these weather apps that are on our phones. And I mean, they're maybe good for about 3-4 days out at tops. But is there a weather app that you feel has the best reliability, or you don't really want to give your okay on one or anything? Because I know a lot of folks, I mean, that's where we get a lot of our weather besides what we get from you. But beyond that, is there a weather app that you would prefer?
Well, I get this question frequently, and what I do tell folks is that I think personally the best source of information, especially when you want to be able to look out a little bit further, that 5 or 10 days or whatever, is the National Weather Service uses weather forecasters who do take the time to interpret the models and to make corrections to them to try to make the forecast the most accurate. A lot of the phone applications and a lot of the online applications that you look at, for them to be able to serve the world with weather information, what they just do is they just automatically take the weather modeling data, raw data, and present it to you. Now, they'll present it to you in different formats. It'll look different. They've got a different way to color the maps, make different icons, but they don't have somebody acting as that human filter, so to speak, to say, you know what, that doesn't look right. I'm going to change it. Now, that doesn't necessarily help for a 10 or 15 day forecast, but I will be honest with you, I don't think it's very useful to have a 10 or 15 day forecast if it's only going to be right half the time. Mm-hmm. So I tell folks, concentrate on that 5 day to 7 day period. That's when you're going to get the most reliability, and you're going to get that from your local and National Weather Service office. Now, the Weather Service by design can't be flashy, and they can't design these really awesome apps like you see these other places provide. They can't, because then the government's competing with private industry. But when it comes to agriculture, aviation, people who really need critically as accurate information as possible, go to your local Weather Service office is what I recommend.
Okay. All right. Well, and it's something I've thought about too. I'm like, well, I've got 2 different weather apps on my phone, wondering which one is more accurate than the other one. And when it gets down to about 12 hours out, they're really a lot more accurate.
Here's an idea. Get about 20 apps on your phone. Take an average and divide by 20, and there's your forecast.
There you go. All right. Sounds good. Well, I appreciate the information here today, and thanks for joining us here again on the Working Ranch Radio Show.
Have a happy holiday.
You too. And again, that was meteorologist Don Day with a look at our long-term weather. His website can be found at dayweather.com, or you can find his YouTube channel as well, where he kicks out a daily video podcast every Monday through Friday morning. Well, stay with us. Coming up after the break, in the essence of our going through the top 10 shows of 2022, I'm going to list out some of those shows that I think are honorable mention, and we'll put a wrap on this week's show when we come back on the Working Ranch Radio Show.
Do you have a young child, grandchild, niece, or nephew that loves the weather and wants to learn more? Day Weather has produced a children's weather journal full of weather facts, fun weather experiments, coloring pages, and pages to record weather observations for every season of the year. The weather journal is for ages 3 to 7 and designed to be fun and educational. The interactive weather projects are fun for the whole family to take part in. For only $10, the Day Weather Journal is a great gift idea for any occasion. Click on our Amazon link to order at dayweather.com.
Well, be sure to join us next week if you want to find out what the top 3 shows were of 2022 as we continue our series. In the meantime, here are 3 shows I'm going to throw in the honorable mention category. Episode 93 on weather events and climate change. Episode 59, Have You Thought About Sheep? And episode 98, this aired just a few weeks ago, is Are You Prepared for Some of These Animal Health Products that are going to go from over-the-counter to prescription products? Just a few you might want to go back and listen to as well. The Working Ranch Radio Show is a production of Working Ranch Magazine, branded #1 by America's Ranchers. My email address is justin.workingranch@gmail.com. Thanks again for joining us. I'm your host, Justin Mills. And until next time, keep your chin down and your mind in the middle. So long.